Okay, we can probably get started here. Okay, good morning. This is the weekly VOLTHA TST meeting. And we can dive right into the agenda here. If anybody has anything that they'd like to cover, feel free to chime in or go ahead and just update the agenda page directly. Can everybody see the my screen? I should be presenting right now.
Yes, it's visible.
Okay, good. So out of the gate, we did have the VOLTHA TS the 2.12 Technar last week. Thank you, Amit, Mahir, and Avalash. Michelle is currently editing the video to trim long lead-ins and trailers and fun stuff like that. Once the video's ready and it's been uploaded to YouTube, we'll go ahead and post it here, and I'm sure she'll post it in the mailing list. So a couple of announcements. Right now we have some jobs that are failing due to AWS nodes being unavailable. I'm debugging this right now. What the behavior seems to be, symptoms seem like the nodes are taking a longer amount of time to start up. And toward the end of the node initialization, AWS generates it's probably a GPG key. AWS is generating a key, which then gets transferred back to the node in Jenkins. It's for a second layer of security because we have our own keys on there. So the node spins up, goes through initialization. AWS generates a key for it, and then the key propagates back to the Jenkins server. The initialization for the nodes seemed to be taking too long, and we're timing out basically before we get the key response back from AWS, which, that's a failure condition for the job. What I'm going to do temporarily is crank up the timeouts in the Jenkins server so the AWS nodes will have more time, to go through and do their things, so they should start up. And I'm going to be debugging the problem off to the side, to figure out what's causing the runtime to increase. But that's pretty much what I know about it right now. This is probably going to affect any AWS job that's running. So, if after probably this afternoon, if you're still seeing failures, let me know, but I'm going to be keeping an eye on the queues in any event. Okay, so I'll make an announcement about a new tool that somebody showed me. In part, this is being rolled out. We need clean code in the repositories. That's a given. But for part of the Jenkins upgrade, some of the JJB upgrades that we're going to end up pulling in, there's a requirement to run linting tools to like lint YAML config files and shell scripts and all that fun stuff. So we basically need to go through in bulk and start cleaning up some of the source code. I've been doing this in a few places, but somebody showed me a tool called pre-commit. It's a Python module, and it augments the Git command behavior. You basically can install commit hooks into your local Git repository, and they can perform tasks when you're doing check-ins or tag-ins. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. The really nice thing is a lot of people have written linting, have written pre-commit wrappers for existing linting tools like YAML lint and shell check and all those fun things. So you basically can run all of the linting tools through this Python module, and it's actually pretty neat. I can give you a quick demo here. So like I have the ONF make repository checked out. I'm in the process of checking in some skeleton config files in the repositories. So you should be able to just use this in the very near future. So all we need is, so there's a file in the repository called requirements.txt. This is a list of the Python modules that are installed when a Python virtual env is set up. So the only module we need for this is the Python pre-commit tool. So to use pre-commit, we just need to install a virtual env. You can do the Python 3. You can install it manually if you want, but we do have some target makefile targets in place that handle most of that handle everything for you. So if I type in make help, the target name is env, which will let you create a Python virtual environment. And there's some extended help too. The env help. So you the env requirements would install, you can, if you add new entries in the requirements.txt file, you can run this to I can't talk today. You have to run pip to install the new modules. This is something that the makefiles use. There's also a venv patched, which will have the virtual env set up with a newer version of Python if you want to use it. That's another part of dependency for the Jenkins job builder upgrade, and this is just a convenience for installing a newer version of Python. So to run the pre-commit tool, we first want to install the virtual env. So we do make venv, and that'll go out, install Python, install the modules from requirements.txt. So we now have a venv installed in a virtual env installed in venv. So we do the usual activate the virtual env by doing source of the activate script. That in turn allows us to find all the commands that were installed in the virtual env. Let's see. So this is all the pre-commit tool is installed by, or is configured by a YAML config file in the root of the repository. It's called pre-commit config.yaml. This is just a license. So if you scroll down a bit in there, you can find the commit hooks that are being installed. These are some defaults. There's a wrapper for the shell check command. There's a wrapper for YAML. There's RST restructured text for VOLTHA docs. There's a whole slew of things in here. But you can go through, specify where the commit hooks are coming from, what revision you want to run. So we're literally able to freeze the linting tools that we're using when we do a VOLTHA release. And you can itemize what hooks you want to run. So like this trailing white space hook, this will go into code and automatically remove the extra spaces or whatever appended to the end of lines. There's an end of file fixer. This makes sure that the final byte on the end of a file is a new line character. If you edit files with VI, it's possible to save lines without a trailing new line. That can cause problems sometimes. We have a check for like tens or hundreds of megabyte files. If somebody happens to check in a binary file or tarballs, this tool will alert on that. So to use it, again, we just run make venv, it's already installed. And then we can just run the pre-commit tool. And it gives you a little bit of, colored output, a little bit of status. I do have some modified files in here. Note that none of these modified files were picked up or were screened by the tool. It only checks files that have you're currently staging. So anything that you've done a git add with. So like if you want to see what an error looks like, I'll modify this one file bin setup. I'll just put a cosmetic edit in it. So we're going to link this script with the shell check tool. And I have an exclusion in here right now because for debugging, there's a global variable that can be defined, and there's different ways to do this to get rid of the error. But because of the way I've defined this, shell check is going to complain because this variable was declared, but it was never used. So if I go in and modify the exclusion and save the file out, do pre-commit, again, it warns about unstaged files, things I haven't checked in, but it's not actually checking anything. because I haven't committed added the file. So if we do a git add to stage the file, if I do pre-commit now, pre-commit will complain about the global variable, and you pretty much have to go in and check it, or go in and fix it. So it's kind of nice because it'll check things and it keeps files maintained as people are making changes once we have this automated. One thing I will note, some of the pre-commit hooks can actually do cleanup work for you, like the trailing white space tool. If you run this on a repository, you don't have to go in and fix all the files with the trailing white space on it. The pre-commit tool will go in and fix them for you, so you can include the fixes with your patch as it goes in. But if you want to try it, it's pretty neat. I've got 3 or 4 patches in Garrett right now, but one of them is going in BBSim, the BBSim repository, VOLTHA docs. I want to say OpenOLT. Eventually they'll all get the skeleton set up so that you can run it on demand, but that's still being worked on. And I lost my window. Hold on just one second. Are there any questions or anything about this? It's pretty straightforward, pretty easy to use. I've included some links to the tool. There's configs in here. This is one of the yes.
Are we going to suggest this to developers to use it before the commits, or are we going to force it? I mean, make a part of the process?
It will need to become part of the process at some point, in part because Jenkins has that as a requirement running the linting tool. I don't think out of the gate we really can do that because there's just so much legacy code that needs to be cleaned up before the linting can run cleanly. This is kind of why I'm taking the approach I'm taking now. We can roll the tools out. I'm going to need to clean things up to do the Jenkins upgrade, but we can roll this out individually into repositories once they've been cleaned up.
Okay.
Or since the hooks are per repository, if we know the code is say the YAML configs are relatively cleaned up in one repository, we could go in, we could actually activate pre-commit for that repository, and all you would end up having to do is go in and like comment out so we don't run shell check if there's a bunch of things to fix. To be able to, like if the YAML sources are cleaned up, we could allow running the YAML lint tool automatically in the repository, disable everything that's known to be problematic, and then over time clean the code up and then enable more hooks, as we go along. So it does not have to be invasive or disruptive for people. And if
this pre-commit config YAML file, so it will be one per repo.
Correct.
Okay.
One thing I'll add about this too, I've been thinking about this a little bit as well. We've had a problem in the past. We're trying to fix that right now, where like the make files were per repository, so they tend to be maintained just in that repository. So over time, we've gotten variations in behavior. Sometimes lint targets are supported, sometimes they're not. Some of the logic for like launching Docker, the flags are different in this one repository than the other. What we might want to do going forward, starting with a skeleton is the right way to do it. But I think eventually we might want to set up a common config for things like the pre-commit tool. This answer would be appropriate for any repository, but maintain a common repository of like hooks we want to run, or linting hooks we want to run in all repositories, like shell check, lint check, things like that. But for lint tools that are specific to one repository, like the only place we would run the JJB linting tool would be in the CI management repositories. Um, we probably need to maintain common configurations and per repository configurations to avoid duplication and to make sure behavior is consistent across the repositories. But to do that, we would probably need to set up, a dedicated repository and then pull it in as a Git submodule, just so all of the repositories save the shit, I can't talk, save the same or use the same configuration. But we'll have to think a little bit about that to get it set up. Um, I've got a few ideas. If anybody has some ideas or would like to work on that, by all means. Oh, and two, if you would like to do any of the cleanup in the repositories, by all means, open a ticket and feel free to start working on it. I'm going to try and start opening tickets over time, and I'll mention them during the TST. Oh, let's see. Oh, yeah, and these commands, this is kind of a synopsis of what you need to do to use the pre-commit tool. But if you have any questions, by all means, ask. Let's see. Wow, got into that a little deeper than I was expecting. Let's see. So does anybody have any updates they'd like to cover for this week?
Uh, Hi, Joey. I have a few. I added it down below. Not sure if it was. Yeah, the open reviews.
Okay.
Yeah. So just this is on the Volta 5291. This is the on-demand diagnosis for the metrics which which we had discussed earlier. So we are planning to wrap it up this week. There are a few open comments already on the Protos, and Maher and Sarkant and Amit, they have a few. Can you please follow up and respond to the comments? So we'll plan to close this by this week. So the Protos are there, the Open OLT adapter is there, the agent changes are there, and also the volt cutter. And there is one more weird thing, I'm not sure. For Volta Go, not able to push the changes. I'm not sure why. There is some security. When we enable HTTPS, it directly takes SSH, and there's something weird going on. I haven't. I checked only a bit, but I'll have to get behind it, and I'll update it in the next TST, or I'll update it in the TST group.
One suggestion, maybe open a ticket and post the symptoms you're seeing in the description or in the comments, and post that in channel, and people could, would have something to look at. Might be able to make
Yeah,
suggestions too.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Okay.
And I have one more, couple of more points. Joe, if you can come down, please.
Mhm.
Yeah, and the pipelines are not running for a few, like OpenVolt adapter and OpenVNU adapter for Volta Go. The pipelines seem to be stuck, like nothing happens there.
This,
Build is not happening.
yeah, this almost certainly is this problem right here.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, this is only going to be limited to cloud-based jobs. If there's anything running in the Berlin lab, then something else might be going on. But basically, Jenkins is trying to start a job. The nodes will go through a cloud initialization, and somewhere before it's fully started, the node startup times out, which basically causes failure and causes whatever task the pipelines are trying to run fail. I'm going to go in after the meeting and increase the timeouts, so that the nodes at least have more time to start up properly. And I'm going to be debugging what's contributing to the failures afterwards.
Okay, sure. Thanks. And on the VGC, Joey, I think so we'll have to resume what we had started.
Yeah, I do have those tickets. I have looked at them. I had a couple of other things cut up. I apologize for this. There've been a couple of other things come up, but it's not dropped off my radar. I know we what is it? We have to go upgraded, get the Docker images set up
Okay.
and the pipeline set up. Yeah,
Yes.
it's definitely in the queue.
Yeah.
You have anything else you would like to bring up? Or would anybody like to bring anything else up? Reviews. Okay. Just a couple of side things that have come up too, and something I heard about last week, just to be aware of. So there's some tools and references. The links are included below. All of this stuff relates to the project copyright notice and licensing and all of that fun stuff. So there are a few license checkers. One of them is called Reuse. There's actually a lint tool and there's actually a plugin for pre-commit to use this. Use it. This will basically go through and scan the code base for copyright notices to make sure all the files are covered under a notice. And one of the newer formats is called SPDX. We're actually using this within, we have it in all of our source codes. So I think over here. Yeah, it's this section down in the middle. So what SPDX is, it's a programmatic description of our copyright notice so that tools can go in and verify, that all the sources are covered. And some of the requirements are, you basically need to be running something off of the approved, or is it the open source software license? Like you need to have the Apache license or the Mozilla license or the BSD. And the tools will highlight any files that are not covered by it. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in here too that you can read up on it. One of the things that came, or where do I want to hit with this? So just a reminder about some of the criteria we have for that Linux Foundation has for open source projects and getting your code into the system. We're aware of this one. There's no NDA, not just NDAs and proprietary software allowed in the system, because it's open source. External code and dependencies that are used needs to originate from a public server or a publicly available server. There cannot be retrieval just for customers of a vendor. All that fun stuff. Code needs to be covered by an OSS license. We do have a makefile target called lint license that does this. It's just not been deployed as a default for repositories. This is another bulk cleanup thing that needs to be done first. And like as I mentioned, the pre-commit script also has a hook for being able to run the same tool. And if you're curious about licensing or the background or any of that stuff, here's some. I think they're freebies. You can go in and watch some Linux Foundation training for them. They're pretty good. The courses are pretty good. They cover everything. One of the things to be aware of, there was some things that came up recently with one of the open source projects. Back in, I think it was August, a vendor had gone in that was contributing to one of the open source projects and decided to change their more current commits from the Mozilla public license to something called the BSL, the business source license. This is definitely not open source. It basically states that the code is free to use, but the minute you cross a threshold where you have a certain number of when a consuming company uses it and they have a certain number of customers, you have to start doing licensing and things like that. So the project was OpenTF and it's now called OpenTofu. So they wanted the group wanted to keep the project open source with open licensing. So basically, they took the code repository, went back in time, and forked the repository to a code base that was covered by the still covered by the Mozilla public license. So they forked the what was becoming a proprietary repository, forked it with an open source license, back with an open source license, and continued to work on the Open Tofu project. There's some news articles in here. It got kind of ugly because the vendor started publicly making allegations that the project was stealing code. They basically were claiming that they just went in and modified the license to take ownership of the code when that wasn't the case. All they did was go in and revert back to an older code base that was open source at the time. And there was just some crazy fallout from this. Another CEO accused them of something similar, but had since walked back the person's statements. And I think there was an allegation in here. There was a reply about slander, so this must not have been a good. This did not evolve in a good way. So just FYI, this is why a lot of the open source licenses are on the code. I know it's a pain to go in and inline the statements into our sources, but having them in there or signing your code as DCO, Developer Certification of Origin, this is basically what protects everybody and keeps everybody on a level playing field. In case somebody decides to take the work that they've done and go off and license it so nobody else can use it. This is what keeps everybody out of legal problems. So definitely a good thing to add in. I thought this was kind of funny too. This was a side comment that somebody made. There was an article in the Harvard Business Review. It came out as a byproduct of everything that has gone on in this block. But the article was labeled, "Why do so many incompetent men become leaders?" And you can read it and make your own opinions on that one. Is there any questions or anything about this? This is just informational, just some background on why we do need it. It can be tedious at times and painful to keep everything up to date, but this is literally why we need to have the open source licenses in the source code, just to be able to protect everybody and keep everybody on a level field.
Yeah, very informative. Thank you. Thank you, Jay.
Okay, cool. Okay, so let's see, I posted this in the TST channel the other day. Somebody contacted me directly. Here it has commented on this as well. The person was following the docs in the VOLTHA Go repository, and there's some comments, some documentation that explains how to set up a Docker container to be able to work locally. But the config files for the composer files for the container have since gone stale. And I don't know if this is a byproduct of, as was pointed out, it's probably a byproduct of shifting over to Helm charts. Question, do we want to continue giving the people the ability to use Docker locally as maybe an easier option to set up an environment to do testing so they don't necessarily have to spin up a full-blown Kubernetes cluster? Or should we deprecate the documentation and just point to the Helm charts in the and Helm is the official answer?
I think we can remove those because it was relevant and useful 5-6 years ago. There was no small Kubernetes deployments like Minikube. So using Docker Compose was useful, but now people can use Minikube or some similar Kubernetes environments. So I think that same guy also emailed me privately and asked me the same question, and I responded to him, you should use the Volta Helm chart repository for installation, and he didn't respond back.
Is it Ivan? Ivan Zhang?
Yes.
Yeah. Actually, he reached out to me as well. So I
Yeah.
He
I
got
told
it.
him the same thing.
He contacted everybody. Okay, that's good. Okay.
So I also
go ahead.
had the same opinion, you know, we don't need to support Docker Compose anymore. We can, yeah, point out the Kubernetes, you know, install instead of it.
Okay, just FYI, I do have a ticket open with a bunch of stuff in here. We'll have to go and deprecate, or we should deprecate the configs for Docker then. If there's any still in the repository, remove the quick start document and replace that with links to Volta docs, or write up a new document if that's appropriate, to use Helm charts and Minikube then. But if anybody would like to work on any of this stuff, it's in the ticket mentioned in the, there's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Okay.
The question perhaps here is, are we going to move this all Docker Compose configuration and scripts, etc., in the repos? Or are we only going to change the Volta docs?
I think that's a question for everybody.
Yeah, question for
yeah.
everybody.
Mhm.
So one way is going to remove all the Docker Compose, you know, scripts, YAML files, etc., from, I think it's in Volta Go repository. The second option is to move them there. So if anyone wants to use it, they can use it, but they need to do the appropriate change, and because they're not up to date. We're not going to update the config files according to the changes done in the repos. So it will be, we will leave all it deprecated in the repos. So the related change should be done according to this, we need to take a decision here in either way.
One thing I'd suggest too, if we're not going to support it, we should get rid of the documentation right off the bat, so new people will not wander into the same leg trap that Evan did.
Yeah, I mean, generally for the deprecated things, we first put a deprecated sign onto the repo or files, whatever it is, for a while, then we remove it. So that's why I'm asking. I also support second on removing it, but we can, I don't know, make them deprecated for this release and then remove the next one.
Sounds good to me too.
I'm not sure. I'm slightly leaning towards removing all of them altogether, but we can do also the deprecate option.
Is there a chance some of the community's infrastructure has been built up around the old way of using Docker, and that may be why, or do you think it's going to be new people trying to get into the project, and this is the setup instructions that they were given or suggested?
So in order to avoid new people to use this, we need to put at least deprecated.
Yeah, I agree. Mhm.
But as you said, there may be envies so that there are still some people using it, seems that. So it may not be a good idea to remove it, suddenly in an instant. So I suggest to put deprecate for this release, then remove at the next.
Okay. And also we can point to the docs VOLTA. Probably people cannot, it is not their first stop when they want to try VOLTA. Probably they are searching VOLTA, and probably the GitHub page comes first as the result, and they are preparing, applying the README. So we should have more pointers for the VOLTA docs, I guess.
Okay. Would anybody like to make the update, the edits?
Yeah, I
Um,
can.
I- I
Serkan?
can do also Mahir, whatever. It's
Okay, any of us. You can assign any of us.
Okay.
Okay.
This is just an FYI, VOLTHA 5301. I was digging, this relates to the copyright stuff. I was poking around in the OpenOLT repository, and it looks like it's just a Debian packaging script, but there's a copyright notice in this piece or for the agents in this repository that's going to be a problem, because it's the NDA flavor. So we'll have to address that at some point. If a copy of the Debian image creation script is available, publicly from or available from a public repository, we could use that in place of this, but we definitely cannot have this copyright notice in the code in the repositories. But that was VOL 5301. Let me see. The last two items I have. We had the note from 2 weeks ago to add a placeholder for the demo, that you brought up earlier. I'll add that after. This is just a heads up. I mentioned 2 scripts in here, if I can get that dialog to close. If you want to query for Jira tickets or Garrett patches, I put a link to the repository again. You can query for VBSIM by the component, the description, or the label. There's a bunch of stuff in here too, but this is bulk triage for finding VBSIM tickets. There's a whole bunch of stuff in here. Some of it may be old. I need to redo these queries. I have an extra flag that you can pass that only considers tickets not closed. This is everything right now, both open and closed tickets, so it's a little bit long. And there's also a Garrett script. You can find this stuff too, but whoops. No, we don't want the script. Sorry, I'm wandering all over the place. We want this one. And this you can query for open patches. These are all the ones that are in here. You can query by person, by topic, any of that fun stuff if you want to use those. But those convenient scripts are in there as well. Okay, so we've got Appalachians. Trouble spelling it there. And tickets. Okay, so with that, I guess I've talked about enough about tools and licensing and everything else today. If anybody has anything they'd like to bring up, the floor is open for discussion. And it looks like we've got about 15 minutes left.
Nothing from me.
Okay, cool. Well, with that, again, the pre-commit tools being rolled out to the repositories, just basic config. It's manual usage. I encourage you to try it out because it is pretty neat. And if you have any questions or problems, let me know. Feel free to update the configs. Just be aware if you add any configuration changes to how lint works or add new pre-commit hooks, just be aware we'll also need to propagate them out to the other repositories. So, they're all doing the same thing. Okay, I guess do the last call on the open floor. If anybody has anything else they'd like to bring up. And with that, I will go and see if I can figure out what's going on with the AWS nodes, and I will post in the channel when I know you'll have a better handle on what's going on. Okay, thanks for joining.
Okay,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Ray.
Bye bye.
Yeah, bye.
Bye.